What's up gamers, Dreamcastguy here, talking today about Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered, because this has at last finally been released. When it comes to the world of RPGs, in my opinion, there is absolutely nothing better than the universe of Final Fantasy. Every game has its own unique setting and characters, magic and monsters, and this kind of makes it incredibly addictive to try and track down and experience them all. In fact, I myself, as a mega lover of Final Fantasy, have managed to beat and play through every entry in the entire franchise, including the spin-offs. But in my mind, Crystal Chronicles has always been fascinating because it really stands on its own. This is a classic Final Fantasy game, and yet instead of centering itself on insane boss fights or complex battle systems, this is completely centered on the idea of multiplayer fun, having you and your buddies craft your own custom journey. When this was released on the GameCube in 2004, it was a very big deal, but can this co-op adventure actually hold up all these years later? Well, in a way, this is still as good as it was back then, but sadly, there are some extremely bad choices that were made by the developers that kind of ruin the better aspects of this game. Now let's start off by talking about the story itself. So in this game, our heroes are born into a world that's covered in this mysterious poison that can kill anything it touches. The air, in fact, is very thick with it. If you even try and just wander around in the countryside, you'll fall over dead in a matter of minutes. The only thing that keeps your particular town safe is this magical crystal in the center of it. In order to keep your town protected from this poisonous gas, every year you and your friends have to go on a giant journey collecting enough energy to keep its defenses charged. This basically means that you're going to be trying to explore a bunch of different dungeons and constantly going further and further into this dangerous landscape. And what really works about this game is that I like that so much of this is customizable. There are a lot of dungeons in this game, and the order you choose to do them, or just kind of the way you choose to tackle them, is kind of up to you. Now let me just quickly say, this is a predominantly multiplayer experience, but it is technically possible to play by yourself. If you're just one of those people that really doesn't want to actually see what this game is like sitting down with online play or with your friends, you could just actually play this completely solo. If you choose to do that, a major part of this game is that since the poison is so deadly, you have this tiny thing called a chalice that follows you along. This basically keeps the poison at bay and gives you a little spot to battle in. And if you're playing the single player, there will be a little tiny Moogle, which is like this little furry creature that'll carry it for you so you can just fight and battle and keep yourself alive and not have to worry about the poison around you. But let me just make it clear, this is definitely not the way the game was intended. The gameplay in this game is actually kind of basic. The way we actually use magic, the way we try and use items and stuff, it's kind of simplistic because the major draw of this game is definitely the idea that you can play with your buddies and they'll always be backing you up. Now let's talk about that multiplayer. Let's really dig into what this game is trying to do best, which is really the times when you're trying to just delve into new zones and see all new styles of monster. Now the thing you really need to keep in mind is that this was definitely designed for a GameCube controller. It's made to be very, very basic when it comes to button presses. And so all the stuff you're seeing here is actually recorded on my PlayStation 4 Pro. Most of the buttons actually do nothing. You have an attack button, you have a menu button, and then you kind of just are able to scroll between your skills. And that's pretty much it. If I try and press the right stick, it does nothing. If I try and pull the triggers like L2 and R2, they do absolutely nothing. There is a lot of stuff in this game that doesn't really do anything because it's still based on tech from the ancient past. And this brings me to one of the things I really wish they managed to update, because there are parts of this game that definitely worked better 16 years ago. Whenever I'm actually scrolling through menus and trying to select the perfect item and try and heal myself or something like that, it can feel a little bit clunky, especially because there's so many unused buttons on my controller. As I was playing through this game with my friend Comic Drake, I kept hoping that they'd done some sort of modernizations. I wish that they'd done something like give us a hotkey system, a shortcut. I wish that there was a way of, whenever I want to try and revive my friends, it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes to, in the middle of a boss fight, have to take up a giant menu that completely dominates my screen when I really just want to focus on all the cool new stuff. Now, when it comes to content that's been added to this remastered edition, there is actually some pretty impressive improvements to what they've done to the game itself. Now, the biggest thing they've done is that originally this game kind of just goes on forever. You can can just keep exploring, keep protecting your town, and keep crafting your own custom version of the story, which is the Crystal Chronicle. But in this, they've decided to add in a bunch of extra bonus dungeons at the very end of the game that kind of remix a bunch of the core mechanics. It makes it where the game is definitely harder. This is an interesting way to try and definitely motivate you if you beat the original game and found it to be way too easy or for like babies or something. Now you definitely have a motivation to push yourself to do these dungeons and level up your skills and make sure you have the best gear crafted. Now, the more obvious improvement to this remaster is definitely the visuals. I mean, obviously they've done a lot to try and make this look a lot more polished. The character models specifically look really, really good. Some of the environmental details, specifically water, have been completely redone and look way, way better, but there are parts of this that still look very weirdly clunky. Like, there's a lot of times when you see trees and stuff and they look like they're a paper cutout. This is one of those really sporadic remakes that doesn't really quite do the best of being a full-blown remaster, but it does have so much added stuff, it does feel like a big, huge upgrade in certain aspects. Now let's talk about definitely the weirdest change they've made, and definitely the thing that I think is going to be probably a deal breaker for a lot of people, which is how the multiplayer works when it comes to connectivity. So the way this worked back in the day was just completely couch co-op. You and your friends would actually sit down and play it on a single TV. Player 1 would have a GameCube controller, and each of the additional people had to play with the special cable that plugged into a Game Boy Advanced. And it was a little bit clunky, but it was also kind of nice. It was cool to be able to have this multiplayer experience. Now things are online only. You cannot play this couch co-op. It absolutely does not exist couch co-op. This is something where you have to connect to a server no matter what. I mean, straight up, I'm going to show you something here that's going to blow your mind. Me and my roommate Comic Drake, we wanted to replicate the original experience we had of actually sitting down with our friends and playing this game from start to finish. What we had to do was, he actually came into my office and we hooked up his PlayStation 4 on one TV and I'm playing on the other TV, and this is the only way to do it. If you actually calculate the cost of my $400 PlayStation 4, he bought his PlayStation 4 for $400, plus the cost of the TVs and the cost of the games, this is like $1,000 of hardware to try and replicate the fun of the original couch co-op experience, which is kind of ridiculous and kind of needless. The fact that they did not decide to put in any sort of couch co-op mode to me seems completely silly, because this is also on something like Nintendo Switch. If you try and play this on Nintendo Switch, even if it is somebody that is in the same room as you, you need to connect to the freaking Square Enix servers in order to do anything multiplayer whatsoever. Now, this does have cross-play. It has full cross-compatibility, so it is possible to invite my friends from any console base to actually come and experience this adventure with me on the PlayStation 4. But this is still actually pretty clunky because it has this weird like key code access system. So in order to actually maintain a friend group, it's a little bit weird and sloppy, but by far the weirdest thing is that basically progress only counts for the person who's hosting the game, which means that all of this right here, my roommate played this game with me for hours and hours and hours, and if he actually boots up his save file, it says that he has never played the game, because since he was playing with me and I was hosting the matches, that means that he is still technically in the starting zone. He has done absolutely nothing in his save file. It says he has made zero progress. The fact that there is not some sort of combined progression system or an ability to actually make it where we can just, like merge together our save files, something to make it where there's this cross compatibility that really makes sense. The fact that I beat the game but he did nothing, it just does not make sense. Now, when it comes to the gameplay itself, I still think that this manages to instill the original flavor. It's nice to unleash giant combination spells. It's cool to still be in these dungeons and trying to figure out puzzles and stuff. And I do think it's cool to actually team up with strangers online, although of course there is the added weirdness that this is region locked. So everybody I played is also an American. Even though I always talk to subscribers and stuff who are really, really nice people that live over in like Israel or people that live in like Europe and Germany and stuff. I'm sorry guys, I can never play with you. It is absolutely locked out. I will never even accidentally run into a single one of you ever, because Square Enix thinks that we don't want that experience. There are so many decisions in this game that still just confuse me, but I can't quite hate it. I still think that this is a really good representation of Crystal Chronicles. If you loved the game back in the day, this is still it. It's got a new coat of paint, it's got some nice little changes to try and spruce up the in-game, but at the heart of it, this is still just Crystal Chronicles at its core. Okay, so we've heard some good and some bad, but let's go to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered a 6.5 out of 10. It really kind of baffles me that there's just so many core mistakes in this game that seems like they could have been so easily avoided, but I guess this is the product we're unfortunately going to get. Thanks so much for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already, but do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. So I've literally been awake for like 24 hours to try and get this video done. So thank you everybody for watching, and I just want to be serious. I love talking Final Fantasy. Whether it's a good game or a bad game, this was a really good video to make. Thank you, seriously. I really appreciate everybody watching, and we're getting so close to 200,000 subscribers. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.